Therefore, eating and drinking becomes an act of worship. Now, a question comes to mind. If it was only about eating and drinking to keep this body alive, then there are some beautiful looking specimens on YouTube that show you how to eat and drink and keep a perfectly looking body. Are they all receiving thawab? Does everybody who eat and drink receive thawab? The answer is cannot be. There has to be some terms and conditions attached. Allah, today when you look at society, at its moral height, recognize that there is social implications and benefits to eating and drinking. For example, we come across the American maxim that is usually used, the family that eats together stays together. And there are many denotations or connotations of the same proverb or maxim, the family that prays together stays together. But for our discussion, we will take this, the family that eats together stays together. They recognize the importance the food plays in keeping the family unit together and united. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recognized the importance of food, of eating and drinking many centuries ago. I wouldn't say 14 centuries ago, but maybe from the day Adam was brought down. That is why all the prophets of Allah have emphasized how it is wajib, compulsory upon the parents to provide for their children. And then there are tens of ahadith teaching us how to sit together, how to eat together. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Ahlul Bayt teach us the importance eating together has the role it plays in keeping the family united. Especially in today's world, where takeaways and mobile phones are at an easy access for everybody. There's no reason to sit with mum and dad anymore, or with brothers and sisters anymore, and have a family meal together. But no, the Ahlul Bayt go a level further. Rasulullah and the Ahlul Bayt recognize also the importance of feeding others and the social implications of eating and drinking. Therefore, we find tens of ahadith encouraging us on feeding others, sharing the generosity of Allah, sharing the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with others, showcasing our generosity and calling guests towards you. And then there are traditions telling us how the guests should behave in the house of the one who is hosting them, and how the host should behave when the guest comes to their house for a meal. And then just to cement all these social implications of the importance of eating together, Rasulullah Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in a tradition tells us that when you sit on the dastarkhan, when you sit on the table, don't be in a hurry to get up and go. Why? Rasulullah says, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not count that time that you are sitting on the dastakhan as part of your life. Can you see how he's emphasizing that it is an act of worship? Why? Because you are sharing the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with others or amongst yourselves. And Allah is far more benevolent than to be blessing you, feeding you with one hand, and then question you about that with another hand. And so Rasulullah says, take your time when you're eating and sitting along together. Enjoy it, because that part of your time will not be questioned about. Now, again, underline the word, not everyone who eats and drinks and sits on banquets is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, including us. And I will come to that in a second, inshallah. So we recognize the social implications of eating and drinking. The verse 24, chapter number 80 of the Holy Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِهِ. When the Mufassirin take this verse, they say that this verse is such a beautiful verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in less words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed many meanings within this word. And there are many facets that this verse of the Holy Quran, small verse of the Holy Quran, can open up for us. For example, somebody who is health conscious would look at this verse and he will say, Allah here is referring to فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِهِ. Man should look at his food. And we discussed this many months ago, that a health conscious person could take this verse and say, maybe I need to look at the source of the food, the quality of the food that I'm eating. Is it organic? Is it not organic? And so on and so forth. From a medical point of view, somebody studying medicine could take this verse and say, SubhanAllah, look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guiding us, that the importance that food plays on our health and our well-being. Today, modern medicine would tell you that many of the causes of many of our problems that we see in our body could be boiled down to the blood. If there are impurities within the blood, If there are diseases within the blood, it would cause problems in the body. When we come to the Holy Quran and when we come to the ahadith of Rasulullah, Rasulullah says something completely different. He says, Al-ma'idatu baytud da. The stomach is the house of all problems. And Rasulullah keeps it quite vague. It doesn't only say it's baytud da, it's not just a problem house for physical well-being, but he leaves it open. Today when our ulama dissect these words of Rasulullah, they extrapolate from this the genius behind Rasulullah's words. Because Rasulullah in essence is saying not only is your stomach the cause of all your physical problems, all your illnesses, but it also has social implications, economical implications, it has spiritual implications. And so somebody could look at this verse and say, oh, Rasulullah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us well-being of the body. Somebody else could pick up the same verse and could say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to understand the importance that food and drink play from a medical point of view. Here, Imam al-Hasan alayhi salatu was salam, and all these ways of looking at food and drink are acts of understanding this verse. But what is true worship? When does eating and drinking become acts of worship in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam tells us that there are 12 etiquettes when it comes to eating and drinking. 4 are wajib, 4 are sunnah, mustahab, and 4 are good moral etiquettes. As for the 4 that are wajib, and remember, if we comply on these, then each morsel of food that now we are eating and drinking anyway, but we're taking it for granted. We don't pay attention to this great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only is it a blessing of Allah, but if we paid a little bit of attention, each morsel of food could become an act of worship in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The 4 etiquettes that are wajib. Number 1, al-ma'rifah. Recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider of all this food and drink. Ultimately, if He did not provide for me, I wouldn't have this food and drink in front of me that I am able to enjoy. So the first level of the wajib part for eating and drinking to become an act of worship is to recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the giver of these bounties. Number 2, ar-rida. Being satisfied. One day, today, my meal could be biryani. I should be happy and I should be satisfied towards Allah, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah, thank you for feeding me biryani. But the tides could turn anytime. Yeah? And my situation could change anytime. Tomorrow, I might only have a piece of bread and some yogurt. Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam is teaching us that regardless whether you are having biryani or bread and yogurt, the level of gratitude, the level of thanking Allah subhanahu and being pleased with Allah's will should be the same. It should not change. It shouldn't be that, oh Allah, I am 2% more pleased with you today because it was chicken biryani. And tomorrow, I'm 2% less pleased with you. No, Imam al-Hasan is saying that is not rida. That is picking and choosing when you are happy with Allah and when you're not happy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Isn't that what Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam in one of his sermons said on his way to Kufa, to Karbala? He says, الناس عبيد الدنيا والدين لحق على ألسنتهم فإذا محصوا بالبلاء قل الديانون. Inshallah, we will discuss this in greater detail, maybe in a few weeks' time. Imam al-Husayn is saying that religion is lip service on many of the tongues of the people. True acid test, the acid test comes when they are put inflicted with calamities. At that time, that is the litmus test of who is still a believer and who isn't a believer. Anyway, Imam al-Hasan says the second level is to be satisfied with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever He has provided you, we should be happy and we should thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 3, at-tasmiyah, saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is a wajib etiquette of eating food. It's not mustahab. It is a wajib etiquette of eating food. Why? In some traditions, it is narrated that the shaitan joins us in the food when we do not say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And the implications of that should be discussed at another time. But saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim at every morsel is recommended. If we can't, then we could say, oh Allah, please accept this as Bismillah from the beginning till the end. And Allah will accept that. Number 4 wajib etiquette is a shukr. thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, showing gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for whatever He has provided. These four are enough for each morsel of our food to become an act of worship. The four that are mustahab, sunnah of Rasulullah. Number one, to be in a state of wudu before eating. Number two, sitting on the left hand side of our legs, as in resting on our left cheek. I don't know how, but I don't know if many of you have tried or not, but that is the sunnah of Rasulullah. Number three, to eat with 3 fingers. Number four, to lick the fingers after finishing eating. And there are some medical benefits that people have researched and provided as to some of these mustahabbat of Rasul that have been taught to us by Rasulullah. The last four that are recommended, an act of good morality, showcases good etiquettes and good moral behaviors. Number one, Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam says you should eat from what is close to you. So for example, if somebody is having gulab jamun at the end of the sufra, you shouldn't call everybody to call that piece of food for you. Just be satisfied with what's in front of you. Maybe it will just come towards you anyway. But to eat from what is close to you. Number two, and this is where I'm really struggling to remember. My memory is now becoming a goldfish like. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I'm going to have to. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For preparation. Here we go. Number one was to eat from what is close to you. Number two is to make the morsels small. When we eat, to take small morsels of food. Number three, to chew properly. That is really important. And number four, and this is a difficult one, especially for us, is not to look at other faces, other people while eating. You should focus on your own food. And here I remember a saying of Lady Fatima az-Zahra alayhi salatu wassalam. And I just remember this from some of the Islamic medicines when I was researching that. Medically, Lady Fatima az-Zahra alayhi salam says to us that when you eat, one of the etiquettes, important etiquettes of eating is to keep an eye on your food while eating. And then she uses the verse of the Quran which we recited at the beginning. Verse 24, chapter 80 of the Holy Quran, Surah Abasa. Allah verbatimly says in the Holy Quran, فَلْيَنظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِهِ. Allah says, man should keep a gaze, should keep his eyes on his food. And in that, there are medical benefits in them for us. So these are the last four etiquettes of the Holy Quran. Again, the same verse could be taken from another facet. A teacher of akhlaq could look at this and could say that Allah is teaching us moral values in this verse. And there are tens of traditions. We've just narrated some of them, but there are tens of traditions of how we should be behaving while eating. We talked about medical benefits. There are tens of, now I just remember there are tens of medical advices by the Ahl al-Bayt. For example, saying Bismillah, eating with the right hand, chewing in your right cheek, starting your food with sea salt, ending it with sea salt. What kind of food should we eat in the mornings? What kind of food should we eat at the evenings? What days to avoid eating fish? What days is mustahab to eat fish? All these are pieces of advice that are available in the traditions, and a whole science has been built with all these traditions. And today the Islamic medicine is based around curing people's diseases from the way we eat, the frequency at which we eat, and what have you. Another person could look at this verse and could say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to teach us control, self-control. For example, there could be times in my life where I'm unable to exercise self-control when it comes to certain whims of mine or certain desires of mine. I cannot stop doing a particular act of haram, for example. Or I'm constantly doing a particular makruh. I know it's wrong, but I keep on doing it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, exercise control with food and drink and you'll be able to attain this strength. And indeed, when we look in the holy month of Ramadan, this is the same method that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses to teach us self-control. He says, I want you to exercise an act that my angels do. When we fast, we are emulating who? Jibreel alayhi salam, Mikael alayhi salam, because they do not eat and drink. But at the same time, Allah says the end goal is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Maybe by controlling eating and drinking a little bit, you may attain taqwa. You'll become more God-fearing, God-conscious. In essence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the frequency And the quantity and the quality that you choose to eat and drink in has a profound effect on your ability to self-control. A final example, somebody else could look at this verse. An ascetic, a arif, a alim who is teaching irfan could look at this verse and say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in essence teaching us something else. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam uses the same verse and he says Allah is telling you to be careful as to what kind of knowledge you are acquiring. فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِهِ. Ta'am here means sustenance. Sustenance could be spiritual sustenance, which is knowledge. Imam is saying you should be careful what kind of knowledge you are acquiring, what you are receiving. An ascetic, a arif could look at this verse and say, no, Allah is trying to tell me the source of my knowledge should be. I should be careful about what the source of my knowledge is. Who is my teacher? What kind of a teacher? Who is teaching me this knowledge? And all of these are different connotations of one verse that in essence is talking about food and drink. But how does this relate to today where we are marking the 10th of the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salatu wassalam? I began this sermon and I asked you all a question for the benefit of those who came late. I said, do you know how to eat? Some people might be thrown back by that. At the time of Harun, there was a alim from the ulama of the court of Harun. His name was Sheikh Junaid al-Baghdadi. Sheikh Junaid one day decided he wanted to meet Bahlul. And so he said to his students, I want to meet Bahlul. They said to him, what do you want with that lunatic? You are a sane person, you are a spiritual leader, what do you want with him? He said, no, I want to meet him, I want to ask him something. Eventually they found Bahlul, he was sleeping on the ground and his takya, his pillow was a brick. These were the companions of our Imams. Anyway, he wakes him up. Are you Abu Wahab Bahlul? He says, yes. He says, are you Junaid al-Baghdadi, the spiritual leader of the people? He says, yes, I am. He said to him, you're going around, Bahlul is now talking to him. He said, you're going around proclaiming to be the spiritual guide of the world, of all these people. Do you even know how to eat? Now, when I asked you the question, you might have thought, what an absurd question. Now, imagine if this was somebody being asked like Ayatollah Sistani, do you know how to eat? By somebody who is seemingly lunatic. He said, well, of course I know how to eat. He said to him, how? He said to him, I begin by saying Bismillah. I use my right hand, I chew in my right cheeks, I take small morsels of food, and I take my time chewing them, and then at the end I say Alhamdulillah. Now all these are things that maybe most of us do anyway. So we thought we knew how to eat and drink as well. Bahlul gets up, he brushes off his clothes, and he says, it's useless talking to you, you don't even know how to eat. And he walks away. The man chases him across the streets of Baghdad, asks him another question, and Bahlul again does the same. Asks him a third question, and Bahlul then again does the same. Eventually the man gave up. Because all these times he was replying to Bahlul, yes, I know, I have the knowledge. Eventually he says, Bahlul, I don't know. He submits to the fact of his ignorance. He says, I don't know, you teach me. Bahlul smiled and he said to him, so far I was arrogantly behaving with you because you were claiming to have knowledge. Yet you are trying to guide the people spiritually. And the most important and vital part of guiding people spiritually is through this. Is through food and drink. Yet you do not even know how to eat and drink. But you are going around trying to guide people spiritually, take them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you don't even know how to eat and drink. Now that you have accepted towards your ignorance and submitted to your ignorance, I will now educate you. He said to him, all the things that you said, eating with the right hand, having salt, all the things, the ahadith that they are mentioned in the ahadith, these are all good etiquettes. But they are all useless if the morsel that you're about to put in your mouth is haram. He said to him, the most important, the primary element when it comes to eating and drinking is to attain it from a halal source. He says, after you have ensured that what you are eating and drinking is halal, then adopt as many of the etiquettes as you can. But for as long as you don't, if the morsel is haram, then you could observe 1,000 etiquettes. That food, although physically might be benefiting you, it is detrimental for you. And this is where we relate it with Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. Today, many of us would give anything to listen to a word of Imam al-Husayn from his own holy mouth. How many of us would long to visit Imam al-Zamana, to visit Imam al-Husayn, to see Imam al-Husayn in our dreams? Today, the smallest thing that becomes attached with Imam al-Husayn, we hold sacred and we become attached to it. The mimbar, the alam, the zari. We love it. Why? Because it's a showcase of our love towards Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. But on the day of Ashura, the same Imam al-Husayn stood in front of people wearing the amama of Rasulullah, sitting on the horse from the progeny of the horses of Rasulullah, wearing the aba of Rasulullah, holding the sword of Rasulullah, saying, I am the blood of Rasulullah. Sermon after sermon he was delivering to the people. But it was making no difference to them. You know why? He said to them, I'll tell you why it's not making a difference to you. He said, لَقَدْ مُلِئَتْ بُطُونُكُم مِّنَ الْحَرَامِ. You're not listening to me and not understanding me because you are not able to understand me. You have filled your stomachs with haram. And so today when we look at this verse 24, chapter 80 of the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, look at your food. It is an act of worship if it is done correctly. But importantly, on this day, when we are marking the 10th of Imam al-Husayn's martyrdom, it is a way of understanding that if we want to connect with Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, we have to look at our food. Is it halal? Is it haram? If we want the words of Imam to impact us, we need to understand, is it halal or is it haram? When we are able to implement this move, I believe, we can then not only, if we are able to follow the instructions of the Ahl al-Bayt and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I believe, not only will we be able to develop strong bodies, minds and spiritual powers, but also we will be able to cultivate and operate a society and an economic system that is not based on greed and lust anymore, but rather on contentment and love and sharing. And I believe when Imam alayhi salam reappears, one of the ways he will be installing peace and tranquility on the earth is by showing people how all 7.2 billion people, and if it's 10 billion then or 20 billion then, how all of them could live in peace and harmony simply by eradicating lust and greed away from us. And the cause of all that is here. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, I'll end with this inshallah. Dawood al-Raqi says, I went to meet Imam alayhi salam. When some water was brought to Imam, Imam drank the water and tears came to his eyes. And he says, Oh Dawood, may Allah curse the killer of Husayn. Then he said something beautiful. So far we've talked about food. Now Imam is educating us how drinking water could become a ibadah. Imam alayhi salam says, by Allah, O Dawood, if a believer drinks a sip of water and remembers my grandfather Husayn and curses his enemies, Allah will give him 100,000 hasanat. He will wipe away 100,000 sins from his book of deeds. He will raise his station by 100,000 levels. He will be given the thawab of setting free 100,000 human beings. And on the day of judgment, the fifth one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will resurrect him with a heart that is as at peace and tranquility. In essence, Imam al-Husayn on the day of Ashura, the words of Imam al-Husayn, Bahlul in his story, Imam al-Sadiq in these traditions are trying to teach us and educate us what the relationship with Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam should be. Our relationship with Imam al-Husayn should not stop at matam and majlis only, but food and drink also need to be moments that remind us and connect us with Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. Now let us flip all these traditions to one side. If now we begin observing eating halal food, remembering Allah and Imam al-Husayn's tragedy every time we drink water, observing the teachings the Ahl al-Bayt taught us in the various traditions of the etiquette of eating food, remembering Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam's instructions and etiquettes of how we should drink and how we should eat, then I believe we will reach a level of spirituality and a level not only where our bodies will be intact and good and well functioning, but it will have a direct correlation with our mind. And the two together will have a direct correlation on our spiritual power. Now when we hear the words of our imams from the mimbars, now we will be able to connect with those words. That is what turned Hur alayhi salam on the day of Ashura. Because he ensured in his life that this was preserved in a halal way. إن أحسن الحديث وأبلغ الموعظة كتاب الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها وترجف الأرض وعمارها وتموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق ويرزق ولا يرزق ويطعم ولا يطعم ويميت الأحياء ويحيي الموتى وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على نبيك اللهم صل وسلم على نبي الرحمة سيدنا ومولانا بالقاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على أمير المؤمنين يعصوب الدين غالب كل غالب مطلوب كل طالب أبا العترة الأطائب سيدنا ومولانا علي بن أبي طالب. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على الصديقة الطاهرة بضعة طه وياسين أم الأئمة سيدتنا ومولاتنا فاطمة بنت رسول الله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سبط الرحمة وإمام الهدى المقتول بسم النقيع المدفون بأرض البقيع سيدنا ومولانا أبي محمد الحسن بن علي. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سبط رسول الله وريحانته وسيد شباب أهل الجنة المنحور عطشانا بلا خطأ المدفون بأرض كربلاء سيدنا ومولانا أبي عبد الله الحسين بن علي. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر وحفه بملائكتك المقربين وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. Inshallah, I just want to box off some of the masail that were left from last week. Firstly, I'll start with a question that was asked, and just to clarify on that. So, yes, last week we just touched on masah. We weren't talking about the masail of wudu, but we touched on masah. So, a question came as to specifically when it comes to the masah of the feet, what is the requirement when it comes to masah of the feet? So, the requirement is that we should start from the tip of our foot. So from the flesh that is just preceding the nails. So from the tip of our foot till the end of our foot at the top. And because of the Quran says إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْن, to the heels. And we can't reach the heels, of course, but the Shar allows us to go to the top part of the end of the foot. So from the tip to the top of the foot. What if somebody can't? So what if somebody is unable to bend down and do the full masah? That is the full requirement for masah, from the tip till the end of the foot. If somebody can't, they're allowed to sit down on the floor, raise the foot on the chair or on a stool, but that is the requirement. Now what if somebody can't? They can't bend down, they can't raise the foot on the chair, and they're unable to start the masah and end the masah where it should be, from the tip of the foot to where it joins with your leg. Then the agha allows for somebody else to take some of the water from the hand of that person and to do the masah on their behalf. Now what if there is nobody available and you're on your own? Then what should you do? Then the Shara' says, then you enter into the realm of tayammum. So the ease is to go into tayammum. Don't force yourself to bend down to do the masjid. So that is masjid. Last week we talked about Jum'ah Masail. Inshallah, if I can, I'll try to box up the Jum'ah Masail as much as I can. So next time, inshallah, when I'm around, we can pick another topic if we still want fiqh Masail. So last week we said that Jum'ah, there has to be a particular distance that has to be observed between one Jum'ah and another Jum'ah. So in this current situation, we have 3 permanent centers, Shia centers in Leicester. Let's say all of them decided to hold Jum'ah from tomorrow, from next week. If there has to be a particular distance, which is called 1 farsakh. 1 farsakh is about 3.4 miles between one center and the other center. If both centers decided to hold Salatul Jum'ah and they are within that 3.4 mile, and I'll come to how the distance is measured. If they are within that vicinity and they both decided to hold Salatul Jum'ah, if they were so scientifically close and they both had people like us, for example, who on the dot 104 will give azan. If as Allahu Akbar was said in both centers at the same time, both salahs are invalid. If Allahu Akbar was said in the first center a few minutes or a few moments before the other center, then one is valid, the one that went first, and the other one is invalid. The only time where Agha says both salahs could be valid is if both members of the communities had valid reasons to believe so for example, we believe that this salah is fulfilling all conditions, including the person who is leading it. If the other members of our community thought, actually no, there are some conditions that are not being fulfilled or satisfied, it's their opinion and they want to hold salah next door in Jum'ah, as long as they can justify to themselves and they're happy that the salah is not fulfilling the rules. Is it? I asked clarity today, and it's not to do with when you open the masjid. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'll get further clarity on that particular one. But so let me finish off, and inshallah, any further questions, I'll get more clarity on it. So where were we? You were all sleeping, yes? Nobody listening. Shall we start salah? So if both start at the same time, both salahs are invalid. If one starts first and the other one starts later, both salahs, one is valid, the other one is invalid. The only time when both are valid is when both people have valid reasons to believe that their salah, or the first group of people obviously are praying. The other group of people might divide up and say, we believe that the alim is not just, for example, and we're going to go bring our own alim, and they can recite next door, and both salahs will be valid. So 3.4 miles, how do we calculate that? On Google, do we look at a straight line, 3.4 miles? The answer is no. The answer is the 3.4 miles needs to be the fastest possible way for somebody to travel from point A to point B. So yeah, straight line will be the shortest, but we can't all jump over people's houses and people's fences to get to the other center. So we will have to go with the shortest route that Google tells us. It's 3.4 miles. Now, I'm not sure whether the other centers are within 3.4 miles to us or not, but they're certainly within 3.4 miles to each other. Okay? So that's number one. Then we said that the salah has to comply with certain conditions. First condition was the time of zawal. So the Salatul Jum'ah can only be prayed at the time of zawal. Recommended. How long can we delay it for? That we said is left a little bit ambiguous to the community as to how much you want to delay, how much do you believe the time of Zuhr is. Secondly, Salatul Jum'ah can only be prayed in Jama'ah. I cannot decide at home today, I feel like praying Salatul Jum'ah, so I'll pray Salatul Jum'ah. Even Jama'ah, there's a condition of how many can pray. So for example, a normal Salah, Salatul Fajr, if we want to pray Jama'ah, if 2 people are present, Jama'ah can be held. Yes? You all know that? Salatul Jum'ah can't be like that. So some ulama say it needs to be a minimum of 5 people plus the khatib, 6. Ayatollah Sistani says no problems if it's 5 people including the khatib. So 4 plus 1, the khatib. But it can only be prayed in Jama'ah. How is Salatul Jum'ah prayed? What is the method of Salatul Jum'ah? It's a very simple salah. So if 5 people got together and they're in the desert or they're traveling somewhere, they're in France somewhere having a weekend off or something like that, and it's day of Jum'ah, it's recommended to pray Salatul Jum'ah according to Ayatollah Sistani as opposed to Salatul Dhuhr. And I'll come to that in a second. How is it? It's so simple. All the khatib has to do is begin with hamd and thana of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Then all he has to say is advise people to be God conscious. Attaqullah. Community of believers have taqwa. And he only has to say in Arabic if he wants. Then he has to recite a short surah of the Quran. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Qul huwallahu ahad. Finishes the surah. First khutbah is done. Then he has to sit for a little while and stand again. Now also one of the conditions of Salat al-Jum'ah is that the khatib has to be standing. If I feel tired today and I want to do the khutbah sitting down, it's not permissible. It's not allowed. So it has to be standing. So the second khutbah, all the khatib has to do is again do hamd and thana, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Then send salawat on Muhammad and Al Muhammad, the imams of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And then all he has to do is ask Allah to forgive the people. Oh Allah, please forgive all of us. Job's done. The two khutbahs are done. What do you say? Shall we try that next time? So Salat al-Jum'ah, as you know, substitutes Salat al-Dhuhr. And the thinking behind it is, Salat al-Jum'ah is 2 rak'at salah, like Salat al-Fajr. The two khutbahs that are compulsory part of Salat al-Jum'ah substitute the other 2 rak'at. Does that make sense? Yeah. Everything else is mustahab. Remembering death, telling people about the affairs of the Muslim Ummah and the world, picking a topic and discussing it, reciting Surah Al-Jum'ah, reciting Surah Al-Munafiqun, all these are mustahabbat, they're not compulsory. So if somebody is traveling and there's 5 people, they can recite Salat Al-Jum'ah within 2 minutes if they want. So then the next part, and you need to remind me a little bit here. What was I going to discuss? The next part I said I'll talk. You are not listening, are you? This is not working out. Salat al-Jum'ah in the presence of a live imam who is in power is wajib. There's no difference amongst our ulama as to the wujub of salah. So Imam Ali alayhi salam is in power. It's wajib in Kufa to be prayed behind Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. And if in Medina he has appointed the wali, he has appointed the governor, then it is wajib to pray for the mu'mineen in Medina under the governor who is appointed directly by Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam. And at the same time, same applied at the time of Imam al-Hasan in the 6-month period that he was a ruler of the Muslims. But what about our time when the Imam is in ghaibah? When the Imam is in ghaibah, here's a difference between our ulama. Some ulama say it's wajib, no problems. Regardless, Imam in ghaibah, Imam not ghaibah, it's wajib. Some say no, it's not permissible to pray Salatul Jum'ah in the ghaibah of Imam. And indeed, there's a group of people who do not pray Salatul Jum'ah. Instead, they pray Salatul Dhuhr jahran. And here's another recommended act. If, for example, we were to miss time of Zawal for Jum'ah, and we decided as a community we no longer want the Jum'ah, let's just pray Dhuhr because the time of Dhuhr has arrived. Then it is mustahab to recite Salatul Dhuhr like you would do Salatul Isha, for example, jahran, loudly. Let's say I'm at work, I can't make Salatul Jum'ah, and I need to recite Salatul Zuhr at work. It's recommended to recite Salatul Dhuhr jahran, loudly. Okay, it's a recommended act for the day of Jum'ah. On the day of Jum'ah, Salatul Dhuhr has to be recited loudly. In the ghaibah of Imam, Agha Sistani and Agha Khoy permit us, and they say it is wajib takhiri. It is an optional wajib. For example, if you choose you want to recite Salatul Jum'ah, fine. And if you recite it with the niyyah of wajib, it substitutes Salatul Dhuhr for you. If you choose, I don't want to recite Salatul Jum'ah, I just want to recite Salatul Dhuhr, that is also an option available to you. All make sense? Alhamdulillah. There was one more thing, but I can't remember. Inshallah, if I remember next time, I'll recite it. Inna ahsan al-hadith wa ablagh al-maw'idha kitabullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم صل على. There are some private announcements. Number one is there is a majlis and a niyaz of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam tonight at 8 p.m. For gents only at Uncle Rafiq Bojani and Brother Shabir Bojani's house, and the address is given on the text message service. There will also be the seniors van has been arranged for after Namaz Maghribain. For those who want transport, the seniors van is available also. They will be going and coming back inshallah to the masjid. The second announcement is there's another majlis of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam on Sunday the 22nd of September, this Sunday at 10:45 a.m. sharp Majlis will be recited by Maulana Sadiq Hassan. So brothers are encouraged to go there as well. There are other announcements, but I've been requested to just say these. As you know, there are majlises of Aza throughout the holy month of Muharram and Ramadan and Safar. So inshallah, the text message service updates us all with regards to that. Let us pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time, to forgive our sins and the sins of our parents, to relieve all those who are oppressed and suppressed around the world, to give good health and good recovery to all those who are not well, mu'mineen and mu'minat around the world, particularly members of our community, with the thawab of Surah Al-Mubarakat Al-Fatiha, tasbaquha as-salawat. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل